Can you please state and spell your last name for the record?
Rich Day, D-A-Y.
What is your occupation?
I'm a sergeant with the Dunn County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed in law enforcement?
Approximately 15 years.
During that time, have you received any specialized training with respect to death investigations or the handling of evidence?
Yes.
Could you briefly describe that training for the jury?
During my time with the Investigations Division of the Sheriff's Office, I've received between 2 to 2.5 weeks of death investigation training. I've attended, I've attended a 40-hour basic evidence technician custodian training.
On March 23rd of 2018, did you learn that there was a deceased male located near a field drive off of 430th Avenue?
I did.
What did you do after you received that information?
I responded to the scene after verifying location, responded to the scene, assisted in securing the scene, initiated a crime scene entry exit log to verify accountability on those entering the scene.
And do you recall calling the Department of Justice or other entities to assist with this investigation?
I did.
And why did you call the Department of Justice?
The Department of Justice has a crime lab scene response team that specializes in scene processing, evidence collection. It's their specialty.
And do you recall meeting with those Department of Justice crime investigators on March 23rd, 2018?
Yes.
And do you recall them examining some footprints on the muddy field drive?
Yes.
Do you also recall them placing flags in those footprints?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
May.
I'm showing you what's been marked as photographs 550 or 564 through 566. And what is depicted in those photographs?
Appears to be the foot tracks exiting the driveway. And my understanding is that is a flag for each footstep.
What about 565?
Appears to be further south down that driveway.
Also with the flags?
Also a flag for each footstep.
And what about 566?
566, looking back north toward 530th Avenue from the top of the hill.
And do these photographs accurately depict the flags in those foot impressions as you remember seeing them on March 23rd, 2018?
Yes.
Move exhibits 564, 565, and 566 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, exhibits 564, 565, and 566 will be received.
I'd request to publish those for the jury.
All right, you may.
And this is exhibit 564. And are those the flags as you recall seeing them? I guess it's,
Yes.
I might need to. I think with that glare, I'm going to come back to it. It's pretty hard to see the initial flag. We'll just continue with some other questioning until we have that ready electronically. Sergeant Day, before leaving the crime scene on March 23rd, what, if anything, do you remember doing with respect to taking items of evidence?
I took custody of the items that were collected by the Department of Justice Crime Lab.
And what happened to the evidence after you took custody of it?
I placed them in Investigator Dykes' squad. They were then transported back to our office and secured in a evidence garage.
And do you recall what happened from the vehicle that was located down that muddy road?
Once processing of the scene was complete, we requested a tow company. The vehicle was towed in the presence of Investigator Dykes, followed back to our facility and secured in that same evidence garage.
And was it in an enclosed garage?
Yes,
And was it locked?
yes.
If I could now display those photographs on the computer. This is Exhibit 564, and are those the flags and the footprints as you recall seeing them?
Yes,
And then turning to Exhibit 565. And are those the footprints from a different view?
yes,
And then 566. And what position would you be standing in this photograph?
this would be from the top of that hill facing back to the north.
And is the north the roadway?
North is 430th Avenue, yes.
Okay, thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 203. What is this document?
These are the Dunn County Sheriff's Office property inventory record sheets.
And do you recognize them?
Yes,
Did you create these property inventory record sheets?
the majority of them, yes.
And is it 21 pages long?
Yes.
And can you explain for the jury what you do with evidence when you receive it?
In a normal case, the handling deputy that takes the case completes the property inventory form, submits it for to be changed from temporary storage to permanent storage. That comes through the evidence custodians. I am one of the evidence custodians for our department. Items that they bring in get placed into a temporary locker. I remove them from a temporary locker into a more permanent storage.
And why are these property inventory records drafted?
To establish what evidence is taken in by our department as well as maintain chain of custody.
And were you generally in charge of the evidence in this case?
Yes,
And do these accurately reflect the property inventory records?
yes,
I'd move Exhibit 203 into evidence.
It's 203.
Yes.
Okay, any objection to Exhibit 203?
Yes, it's irrelevant, 90403, happy to approach on the side or take it up later.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll take that up. I'll just withhold ruling on that at this point. Okay.
And as part of your duties in this case, do you recall receiving and placing into evidence the defendant's clothes?
yes,
Turning to page 6 of Exhibit 203. Are those some of the items that you received in relation to the defendant's clothes?
yes.
And if I could have you step down and put on some gloves. Your Honor, I don't believe there's an objection for the defense. I think these have been previously marked as Exhibit 221, the gray leggings. I believe that belong to the defendant. Exhibit 222, a blue button-up with white spots on it. Exhibit 223, a blue and white plaid button-up. Exhibit 224, a paper bag containing a yellow tiger shirt. Exhibit 225, jeans. And Exhibit 226, a gold sweater.
You do not object to the introduction or publication, Judge?
All right then, ladies and gentlemen, exhibits 221, 222, 223, 224, 225, and 226 will be received into evidence. Madam Clerk, do you have all those? Okay.
Sergeant, if you could start with exhibit number 221, a pair of gray leggings. Are those the same leggings you recall from this case?
Yes.
And if you could publish them for the jury, if you could lift them up. And then if you could also flip it around, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I guess if you can kind of roll it up and you don't have to completely package it.
Just place it back in the bag.
I don't think it even needs to go in the bag at this point. All right, and then after you get your new gloves on, we'll move to Exhibit 222. I believe it was on your property inventory record, item 31, a paper bag containing a blue button-up long sleeve shirt with white spots. And is that the same blue button-up with white spots you remember from this case?
Yes.
thank you. It might be better just to just put them back in the bag, actually.
No, I'm probably gonna ask a question.
No. Okay, never mind. So next will be Exhibit 223, a blue and white plaid button-up shirt, your evidence item number 32. Thank you. And the next item will be Exhibit 224, paper bag containing a yellow tiger shirt, your exhibit number 33. Or your item number 33, Exhibit 224. Sergeant, can I see that? Is it? It's inside out. Can you put it right side out? Thank you. And the next exhibit will be number 225, paper bag containing jeans. Your inventory, property number 35. Sergeant, why do you have so many pieces of paper wrapped in these?
When items are viewed by prosecution, by defense, removed from evidence to photograph, when they're taken out, they're laid out on a clean piece of white paper. When it's repackaged, we keep those pieces of paper in case trace evidence, dirt, hair, fibers, anything like that should fall off of them. It's all retained.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. And then the last item will be Exhibit 226, paper bag containing a gold sweater, property inventory number 36. And I have no further questions for Sergeant Day.
All right, Mr. Nelson, are you going to do cross-examination?
Yes, sir. Can we approach, I just have a question about how I want to deal with the evidence. I want to run it by Your Honor before I do so.
All right. Before we continue, ladies and gentlemen, just note that the court is going to or has received Exhibit 203 in evidence, a property inventory sheet. And just note that for the record. Okay, Mr. Nelson, you ready?
Thank you. Mr. Day, I want to ask you some questions about the evidence that you just went through and have you pull out some items. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So first I want to start with the T-shirt, which I believe is Exhibit 224. And you're going to have Mr. Moen here help you with that, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So the plan is for you and Mr. Moen to pull those out of evidence, and then I'm going to ask you to point out what, if any, defects you see on the items of evidence, okay? Yes, sir. Judge, while I'm doing this, I want to display the corresponding photograph that's already been marked into evidence for each one of these pieces of clothing. Can I do that?
That's fine. Go ahead.
So I'm putting on the Elmo Exhibit 639, which is well, it speaks for itself, I guess. Okay. Mr. Day, you can see on the screen the photo, Exhibit 639, you see that?
Yes.
And that appears to be a photo of the item of evidence that you have there in front of you, Exhibit 224, is that correct?
Correct.
Could you have perhaps Mr. Moen pick it up and you and I go to the other side? Is there, on the screen there, you're able to see a red circle that points out a defect, is that right?
That's correct.
Is there such a defect on that shirt?
There is.
Can you point that out in a way that all the jurors could see? I know there's one juror here. perhaps put your hand underneath to just show the,
There's a small tear, approximately 3/4 of an inch.
okay. And there on my red dot is approximately where it's at?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to eventually ask you some questions about where that defect is in relation to some of the other pieces of clothing, so to just keep that in mind.
Okay.
We might need to open it back up, but I wanted to just remind you of that now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Next, I wanted to ask you then about Exhibit 222, the blue button-up shirt. Judge, while I do that, I'm putting Exhibit 640 on the Elmo. Is there a way to sort of... Mr. Day, on the screen behind you or the screen in front of you, you see Exhibit 640, that appears to be a picture of the blue button-up?
Yes.
And that's the same button-up that you previously opened up, that's Exhibit 222, is that right?
Yes.
That you're opening up right now. You could have Mr. Moen pick that up so that the front is visible to the juror. Mr. Moen, is there any chance you could, I know you're, there you go. Could you just show the right side to begin with? I know you have the whole, so I just want to see this, if there's a way that you could hold it so we can see the right side completely. There we go. So there's obviously some defects on this shirt, is that right, Mr. Day?
Yes.
Is there, obviously there's one big visible defect, is that right?
Yes.
I'm going to leave that for last. I want to talk about some of the smaller defects. I know we see one on the photo in that area. Is that on the shirt as well?
Yes.
Can you show that to the jury? Okay. That's in this area here, where the red dot is. There's a defect on the bottom of the shirt.
Yes.
And then just to your right, to the center of the shirt, there's a second defect. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then up here on the top, is this an additional defect in this area?
Yes.
And then we have a fourth defect, this large hole in the shirt, is that right?
Yes.
Fair to say that the t-shirt, you saw there was a defect in the t-shirt as well, correct?
Yes.
Does that appear to be in about the same place if somebody was wearing it as the defect in the middle of the shirt that my red dot's on right now, just below and to the outside of the large hole in the shirt?
Can you flip back to that last photo?
Sure. Now, Exhibit 639 is on the screen.
Same area. The defect here appears to be horizontal, where that one appears to be vertical.
Okay, so obviously it would depend on the manner in which the person was wearing it.
True.
And whether there's any dynamic movement by that person at the time that the defect is done, correct? So it's consistent with being probably any of these four holes. Would that be fair to say?
It's in that area.
Okay. Now on the large hole in there appears to be some reddish brown stains in the area around the hole. Is that correct?
Yes.
This here where I'm showing on the dot, does that appear to be a reddish brown stain?
Yes.
And does there appear to be any on the button side of it at all?
There's a small amount down here by my
Okay.
phone.
And I'm going to put the picture back up so we can, I'm not sure if everybody can see because you're multitasking in a fantastic way, but I just want to make sure you were pointing out down in this area. which on the screen here corresponds to this area generally. You can want the pointer, you're welcome to have the pointer, sir. Right there? Okay. Can you pull the flap out from under that and pull that, or turn that around so that it's, so to speak, right side out? Now first, can you just turn to the side and find some way, on the outside of that flap, if it was back and attached, are there some red and brown stains on that, outside of that?
Yes.
And is that in this area right here?
Right here, yes.
Which, if I'm on the screen, is this area right here?
Correct.
Okay, and that's on the inner right side near the, as we're looking at it, orientated to us, on the right side of that cut as you're looking at it, towards the top near the middle of the shirt. Is that fair?
Yes,
And that's a red and brown stain, correct?
it is.
And does that extend around to the back side of that? If you flip that over, can you see that same red and brown stain on the inside of that shirt?
Yes,
And so it's both on the outside and the inside of that shirt, correct?
correct.
Fair to say you're not able to determine whether that red and brown stain soaked through or whether it came around on the outside. You're not able to determine that, agreed?
I am not.
You just know that there's a red and brown stain on both sides of that. I don't know, what do we want to call this piece that's hanging there, this hanging cut? What's a better term for it? You probably have a technical term for that?
I don't.
Okay,
That
so
sounds accurate.
that hanging piece of cloth, there's a red and brown stain on both the inside and the outside of that, is that correct?
Yes.
And then I want to ask you some more questions about this red and brown, that stain in particular. And thank you, Mr. Moen, appreciate your involvement in this. On the out, I want to get to this right here. Is there a red and brown stain in this area here?
Yes.
And that's, again, on the inside of that piece of cloth as it flopped over, there's a red and brown stain there, correct?
Yes.
Now, if you pull that up, the piece of cloth up, is there a corresponding red and brown stain on the outside of that piece of cloth?
No.
There is not. Okay.
Faintly visible.
Faintly visible, as if it's coming through the shirt from the inside to the out.
Possibility.
Okay, and if you can drop that down again then. Then if you can just open the shirt so it, in this manner. Is there any red and brown stains on the inside of this shirt?
Yes.
Right here where I'm pointing?
Correct.
And does that have a corresponding red and brown stain on the outside of the shirt in the same area?
Yes.
Okay. And again, whether that seeped through or whether that just came, there's two different stains, you don't know. Agreed? All right. Thank you. You doing all right? If I want to see the other side of the shirt here. Now I'm going to be looking at these red and brown stains here on the left side of the shirt as the person is wearing it along the middle place where you put the buttons in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Are those same red and brown stains visible on the shirt that you look at here?
Yes.
Exhibit 222, correct? Can you point those
Ladies
out?
and gentlemen, are you all able to see?
Yeah, she moves.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and the large one up on top,
Okay.
corresponding to the large one on top there. And the smaller one, a little more towards the outside, on the bottom.
And that corresponds to the one we see in this photo here,
Correct.
about the third button down that we can see. Is that about right?
Yes.
Directly across from the hole in the shirt, correct?
Yes.
All right. And then I want to ask you just a little bit about the left sleeve, okay? There is a there's a defect in the left sleeve. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Can you just point that out to the jury and show them so they can see the size of that? Again, I'm going to ask you some questions about that in comparison to some of the other items. I understand you don't have a ruler with you, and this is a guesstimate, but what would be your approximate Again, I think there's more specific measurements later, but right there, how big does that defect appear to be?
Approximately 1.5 inches.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only questions I have about Exhibit 222. Next, I want to ask you about Exhibit 226, which is the gold sweater. While they're doing that, I'm going to display Exhibit 619, which was previously admitted the photo of the gold sweater. Hold that up and display the front of it for the jurors, please. Mr. Day, on the front of that, along the area where it's cut, you see on the screen here the photo of the same sweater?
Yes.
Along the outside of that defect as well as along the inside of that defect, when you look at the shirt itself, fair to say not the picture, but once you look at the shirt, there are no red or brown stains visible along those lines. Agreed?
Agreed.
And same with the other side of it, that there are no red and brown stains that are visible along those lines. Agreed?
Agreed.
And you're familiar with the investigation in this case?
Yes.
You aware whether this sweater was at any time tested from a DNA standpoint?
I would have to look at the evidence transmittal forms to see if this was an item that went to the crime lab.
Okay. And some items go to the crime lab and don't get tested, right? So just because it went there doesn't mean it was tested. Agreed? All right. And then I want to ask you about, so it might seem obvious, but I need to ask, the large defect that splits this sweater in half, is that in the same area? If somebody were wearing that over the top of the blue button-up Exhibit 222, which is now displayed on the screen, is that in the same area that would expose those defects that we pointed out on the blue button-up?
It would be consistent with the right hemisphere of the body, right side of the button line. So
Okay, all right. And then I want to ask about the left arm there. There's a defect in the left arm, is that right?
yes.
If you could put your hand in there to show the size of that defect. First off, you would agree that this defect appears to be larger than the defect in the left arm on the blue button. Agreed?
Yes.
Again, I understand it's a guesstimate and you don't have a ruler with you. What would you estimate the size of that defect to be?
4.5 to 5 inches, depending on how the sweater is stretched.
Okay. All right, those are the only questions I have about that. I am going to ask you questions next about the blue flannel, and I'm going to maybe ask you about the size of the sweater in comparison to the blue flannel. So if you want to hold that up to get a picture, I understand that there's a size tag on there. But
Size of the shirt itself?
know the size as your eye perceives it. The size on the shirt itself says XS, is that correct?
Correct.
Which, based upon your training and experience, would lead you to believe it's extra small.
Correct.
And next, I want to ask you about Exhibit 2 to 3, the blue and white flannel shirt. while they're doing that, Judge, I'm going to display Exhibit 632, which is the previously admitted photo of the same piece of evidence. Up Exhibit 223, is that right?
Yes.
And that's labeled the plaid shirt that's also displayed up on the screen, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, if you could hold that up and display the front of that. Fair to say, based upon your investigation and your observation of this shirt before as well as now, there are not defects to the front of the shirt in any manner. Agreed?
Small cut down here.
Okay. And you said you used the word cut.
Small hole.
There's a defect, agreed?
Defect.
How that was caused, may have been a cut, may have been something else, you're not sure. Okay. Okay. And now on the shirt itself, on the picture, there's what appears to be a red and brown stain that I'm pointing at. Do you see that on the screen?
Yes.
Is there a corresponding mark on the front of the flannel shirt?
There it is.
And then there appears to be, yes, you're pointing to that out right now. Along the bottom hem of the shirt, there also appears to be mud, perhaps, or dirt of some sort, or it's at least dirty and brown and caked.
Correct.
And there may or may not be red and brown stains along the hem of that. Can you tell?
No.
Okay. How about on the other side? Anything obvious? And I think the crime lab people are going to come here later, but just to
It's possible that this could be a reddish brown stain. Hard to tell between that and dirt.
And so, as I'm looking up at the shirt on the screen, the shirt is not open on the screen, but if it'd be on the inside of approximately where my button is that fair to say? Where the red button is?
Pretty close, yes.
And if you could just turn and maybe display that, am I in the general vicinity there?
Yep. Yes.
All right, and then up above that is the inside of the previous red and brown stain that you pointed out is visible from the front of the shirt, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, and then if we can go to the left side of the shirt, again, I know, we're gonna get to the arm, I know there's defects to the arm, but on the left side of the front of the shirt, are there any visible defects?
No.
And there appears to be left side, similar to the right, that there's some brown dirt caked on there, or something. We don't know the substance, but it appears, at least right now, as dried mud or dirt. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see any, other than the mud and the dirt, do you see any red or brown stains that might be something else?
Some red and brown stains right in this area here.
And that's on the the bottom portion of that left side of the front of the shirt, is that right?
Correct.
About 3 to 4 inches from the top, from the bottom of the shirt, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is that, again, if you open it up and you see any corresponding marks on the inside of that that are of note?
More dirt in that same area as the front. Doesn't appear any reddish brown stains.
Okay, so now I want to ask you questions about the left arm. There's a defect to the left arm, is that right?
Yes.
Can you display that to the jury perhaps with your, come on over. There, can I stand on this side, Judge?
Yes.
There appear to be one large hole, oops, where your hand is sticking out, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's larger than the hole, would you agree, on the gold sweater?
Yes, it appears to be.
How big would you estimate that hole to be?
Around 6 inches.
Okay, and then there's a second defect further up the sleeve, is that correct?
Yes,
And that would appear to be how large?
approximately 2 inches.
Okay, and if you recall from the gold sweater I'm going to display on the screen, there was a second defect on the gold sweater in approximately the same place on the gold sweater as the second defect is on the flannel shirt, is that right?
Yes.
And the defect on the gold sweater was smaller than the second defect on the flannel shirt, would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Those are the only questions I have about that shirt, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't. Would you agree that this shirt, this blue shirt, exhibit 223, appears to be larger in size than the gold sweater? Agreed?
Yes, it appears to be.
It appears to be the largest of all of the items of clothing that we've discussed so far, the t-shirt, the blue button-up, the sweater, and then the blue flannel. Agreed?
Yes.
The blue flannel appears to be the biggest of all of those.
Yes.
All right. Those are the only questions I have about those 4 items. And then if we could move on to the bottom half, the leggings and the jeans.
Discussing that with
While they're doing that, Judge, I'm going to display Exhibit 569, which is a photo of the leggings, and I'm going to ask them to now pull out. I believe the leggings are Exhibit 221, is that right? Mr. Mullen, if you could hold those up and display the front of those to the jury, please. On the screen behind you, Mr. Day, is a photo of those same leggings. Do you agree?
Yes.
On the photo, there appears to be 4, perhaps 5 visible defects to the leggings. Is that right?
Yes.
So I just want to go through each one of those. So let's start at the top, perhaps. There's the corresponding one that is, if someone were wearing it, orientated to that, it would be on the right side of what I believe is called the pubis mound.
Yes.
And then there is a larger defect just barely to the right, and it extends down the lower right-hand leg in that same area. Is that right?
Yes.
Are there reddish brown stains on either of those, along the edges of those?
Yes.
And can you point them out to the jury?
They're visible right here.
And that's you're pointing to the area that closest to the center line on the leggings, is that right?
Correct.
All right. And there was on the screen, you can see just a tiny, another defect below those two. Is that correspond on the actual item?
Yes.
Okay. So then if we go down the left leg, as you see on the screen, there's a defect on what we would, if someone were wearing it, would be on the inner left thigh. Do you agree?
Yes.
And is that visible on the actual item?
It is.
And you're showing that right now to the jurors?
Yes.
All right. And then lastly, on the screen, there's a defect on if the person was wearing it, would be the outer right thigh. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you show that to the jurors? Fair to say that that has a red and brown stain all around it. Is that correct?
Nearly all around. There's a small spot here that
May or may not. Okay. Fair to say that that looks, I don't know, what would a redder, browner, more distinct than the previous stains that we observed?
appears to be more of that substance, whatever it
Okay.
is.
All right, and then eventually I'm going to ask you how these defects correspond with the genes, which I'm going to ask you about next. So if you can just hold that in your mind when we get to the next piece. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, I want to, if you could please, pull out Exhibit 225, which is the genes. While they're doing that, Judge, I'm going to display for the jury Exhibit 570, which is a previously admitted photo of those same genes. Mr. Moen, if you'd be so kind as to hold those up again, the front of it to the jurors. Behind you, Mr. Day, you see the photo of the genes displayed?
Yes.
I want to talk about this defect here on the left leg and then just move across the genes first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is there a defect in the left leg there?
There is.
Does that correspond with the defect that we previously observed on the leggings?
Yes.
Same general area, correct?
Correct.
And depending upon, again, how the clothing fit or the movement of the person, that would be consistent with, those two holes are consistent with each other.
Similar area, yes.
All right. Do you observe any red or brown stains around that area? Nothing at least visible to your naked eye today?
Correct.
Okay. And then as we move across, there is a large hole in the jeans, is that right?
Yes.
And that goes from up near the bottom of the zipper, about an inch from the bottom of the zipper, is that fair?
Yes.
About 12 inches down the inner portion of the right thigh as somebody would be wearing these, correct?
Yes.
Do you see any light or reddish brown stains along the defect area of that. I understand there might be some in the middle, but just right now along the defect area of that.
Just in this area.
Okay. And when this area, you're saying on the defect, as the person's wearing it, it's on the right side of that defect, closer to the outside of the right thigh than the inside, is that right? I'm just trying to make sure I describe it properly. Is that what you're pointing out?
Yes, that would be accurate.
Is it along the area that appears to be frayed? Or is it on the inside of that? I just want to make sure. I see a defect in this area. Do you see where I'm pointing? Are you referring to a different red and, I'm not a defect. I see a red and brown stain in this area where my pointer is, correct?
Just above where your pointer is, appears another stain in that area.
Okay. And then there's the second one that's about an inch or two off of the defect in the leg, in the pant. Is that right?
Correct.
All right, then lastly, we have the defect, excuse me, on the outside of the right leg. Is that right?
Yes.
And again, that corresponds, well, let me back up, I apologize. This large hole here corresponds with the same area that we saw in the leggings where there was the 3 defects. Is that right?
Yes, similar area.
And then on the right leg, there's a defect on the outside of the right leg, agreed?
Yes.
And again, approximate size today, 5-6 inches, bigger than that, smaller than that?
6 to 7 inches.
6 to 7 inches. And that again corresponds to the defect that we saw in the leggings previously, agreed?
Same area, yes.
And on here, there's more reddish brown stains along the frayed area where the defect is. On the
Yes.
outside right, is that agreed?
Yes.
Okay. And then other than that, the pants are covered in mud. Would you agree?
I agree.
And even as you just picked it up now, there's all kinds of mud in the white paper there that keeps falling off every time you pull these out, correct? This isn't the first time you've pulled these jeans out of a bag, right?
No.
And every time you do it, more mud keeps coming off. Agreed? All right. Those are the only questions I have about those jeans. Thank you. And then I just want to ask you about 2 other items that haven't been pulled out of evidence yet, but I'm done with the close. Thank you, Mr. Mullin.
Leave that one out of the bag, too.
Okay.
You can have a seat, sir. Thank you. Want to ask you some questions about Exhibit 203, the property inventory record, okay?
Yes.
You have listed here in Exhibit 203 items of evidence that have been inventoried by the Dunn County Sheriff's Department, is that right?
Yes.
If you go to item 113 on DOJ page 5663. You see that item?
I do.
That is labeled discs of 229 squad cam video, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know, is Deputy Matthew Feeney ID'd as Officer 229?
Yes.
So that item 113, you have in evidence a squad cam video recording of Mr. Feeney's interaction on March 22nd, 2018, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And then if we turn the page to item 131, That's 4 discs of Eau Claire Police Department Officer Reeves squad camera. Is that right?
Yes.
So again, you have video and audio recordings of Eau Claire Police Department Officer Reeves' interactions regarding this case on March 22nd, 2018. Is that right?
I guess I don't know the date on that one.
Okay. And then if we turn 2 more pages to item 145, that is Squad 217 Deputy Shields' initial contact with Ezra McCandless. Is that right?
Yes.
And that is again a squad cam video and audio recording of that interaction, correct?
Yes.
And Dunn County Sheriff's Department has that evidence in their possession. Agreed?
Yes.
And then if you turn 2 more pages to item 168, that is a DVD recording of Wisconsin State Patrol Trooper Timothy Knudsen's squad camera from that same day, March 22nd, 2018 as well. Agreed?
Yes.
And again, that recording, both audio and video, is in the possession of the Dunn County Sheriff's Department. Agreed?
Agreed.
Lastly, I want to talk to you about items 72 and 77, which are on page 5659 of Exhibit 203. Are you there?
Yes.
Item 72, is that here to the... Do you have item 72 there in front of you?
I do.
And what is item 72?
Hairs and/or fibers collected from the back of item number 71.
And that's at crime lab marker 4A?
Correct.
So have you ever opened that before?
No.
Do you have any reason to believe that the hair that was collected at crime lab marker 4A is not in there?
No.
That's what's in there?
That's what I believe is in there, yes.
Move for the admission of item 72, which I'll have marked as exhibit number.
Is there any objection?
No.
I'm putting exhibit sticker 571 on the item we just talked about, which is item 72, is that right?
Yes.
Move for the admission of exhibit 571, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 571 will be received.
And then I have item 77 from that same property list. What is item 77?
Described as a wad of dark brown hairs collected from the rear driver's side floor. Crime lab marker number 7.
And showing you what's now been marked as exhibit 572, does that appear to be the corresponding item?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to believe that inside exhibit 572 is anything other than the wad of dark brown hair from the floor of the rear driver's side that's listed on there?
No.
Move for the admission of exhibit 572, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 572 will be received.
On those, do you want these out? On exhibit 203, you also have listed under item 104 on page 5662. What is item 104?
Item 104 is head hair samples taken from McCandless.
And is it your understanding that the 2 exhibits we just went through, 571 and 572, as well as item 104 from this list were all sent to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
I believe they were.
Those are the only questions I have.
Is item 104, you asking that be marked, or?
I don't have it. I don't know if they have it. I'm not,
Okay, very well. No further questions?
no further questions. Joe.
Right. Does the state have any revenue?
Sergeant Day, you were asked about, maybe if I go over it, this blue button-up shirt and a small defect that you observed.
Yes.
And if I recall correctly, I believe this is exhibit 640. You were asked whether there was a, I think I'm right here, is that one of the defects you were asked about? If it was, I think you said it was horizontal in nature? Does that sound right?
Yes.
And then you were asked with the corresponding shirt, exhibit 639, if it was consistent with the same defect in that shirt?
Correct.
And do you agree that they're in different directions? One's vertical and one's horizontal?
Yes.
And I apologize, I need you to glove up just one more time. Exhibit 222. It's the blue and white plaid button-up.
So I have exhibit 222 is the blue button up and exhibit 223 is the blue and white plan.
The blue button-up with white spots. It's exhibit 222. So exhibit 222 is the blue shirt with white spots, and I know you were asked a number of questions, but could you show for the jury if you observe any mud on this shirt, and if so, where? Do you need Greg to hold it up?
That might help. If you'd like me to point out. I do see what appears to be mud on the front of the shirt towards the center line, the buttoning area. Throughout most of the front of the shirt from top to bottom. At least on the right side, on the left side, majority appears to be in this center area.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for the physical evidence. And then Sergeant, you were asked a number of questions regarding different defects in the clothing. Would you agree that the type of fabric has an impact on how a defect is present in the clothing?
Absolutely.
And the sizing, you know, if something's bigger or smaller may have an impact on the type of defect?
Yes.
And you were also asked about this, I think you were specifically asked, was this sweater, if, you know, the cut across the sweater. Do you know if the sweater was actually cut or if it was torn?
I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know if that sweater was cut? Do you know if the sweater was torn?
I don't.
Do you know if the sweater was ripped?
I don't.
So do you have any idea how any of the defects in the clothes appeared? How they came, you know, to appear in the clothes?
No.
And you also were asked about some different items of evidence in Exhibit 203. Did you actually, have you watched any of these squad cameras?
No.
So do you know if any of these discs have anything of evidentiary value?
I don't.
You just place them in evidence?
Yes.
And are you familiar with how the squad cameras work with the Dunn County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Do you guys have body cameras?
No.
So a squad camera, does it only depict what's in front of the squad as it's positioned?
Yes.
So if you're parked outside the building, facing the building, it's only going to show you the building, is that right?
Correct.
I have nothing else.
Any recross?
Briefly, Judge, regarding the recordings, there's audio recordings on the Dunn County squad cams, correct?
There is.
And the device that records the audio is on the officer's person, agreed?
It should be, yes.
And so if a officer gets out of their squad and is out of view of the video recording, there still may be audio that's recorded, agreed?
There may be. It kind of depends on the distance. If you go out of range, then it would cut out audio. As long as you're in range, you would have audio.
And do you know what the range is?
Not off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay, but there's often, you've looked at your own squad recordings in other cases, right?
Yes.
It's not unusual, again, because you, in your experience, to get out of the car, to walk 20, 30 feet away and the audio to still pick up, agreed?
Yes.
All right, just briefly about, and we don't need to go to the evidence, I want to ask you about that shirt, okay? I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 640. Do you see that on the screen?
I do.
And if I recall, you pointed out some mud on the shirt, and is it in this area here in the front left portion of the shirt as the person who's wearing it?
Yes.
Near the midline?
Yes.
And then there's some also on the front right as the person's wearing it near the large defect?
Yes.
That's the area where the mud is that right?
There is some further down as well. It's the red button.
The red button, yeah.
There is some down in this area as well. So
Okay.
Here, a little bit here. It's not as prominent as up here.
And as you pointed that out, just so we can all see with our eyes, but I want to make sure it's clear, you were taking the red pointer and going down the midline near the button-up portion of it, correct?
Yes.
And then you extended it over as we got farther down to about the second to the last button to the right side as the person wears it. There's some more what appears to be perhaps mud. Agreed?
Yes.
Now, if somebody were wearing that shirt underneath a sweater that had just been cut open, would you agree that the areas where the mud is visible on the shirt, if the sweater got cut open, would be exposed to the elements?
It's possible. It just depends on the positioning of that sweater.
It depends on how tight the sweater may have been on the person, correct?
Yes.
Because if the sweater was really tight and then it got cut, it might open wide open, correct?
Possibly.
Because the tension would then pull it apart. Agreed?
It's possible.
All right. Those are the only questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Day. I believe are you planning to recall Sergeant Day or is he released?
He's released.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant.